Okay, which one do you recommend?
So I know you both asked for different topics, and I didn't go with either of them. Sorry.
I'm waiting to, I heard you posted that it's gonna be Nashim Tzadkinos.
Exactly. Mostly because my husband had already started looking into it, so it was
Fine.
just
All
this is
good.
what we went with this week. So we're discussing the righteous woman of Egypt and the Midbar.
Oh, you're gonna get that.
Okay. So they're mostly Gemara and Midrash, and there's not really a lot of commentary on this stuff. It's mostly just Gemara and the Midrash. So it's kind of two separate generations, but it's kind of the same generation. It's the woman from Egypt who went into the desert. And there are some obviously who were born later, and it's kind of two separate generations, but it's also
More than 100 years.
right.
Years,
But
so.
they
210. Well,
but they went out, right? So I mean, Yocheved still was living. We discovered it's some of them are the same, some of them aren't, and also the last years of
What do you
Egypt,
want?
right?
What
Those
do you
women
want?
left.
I just want to push it down. And perhaps I'll take time to comfort me.
it's not a tiger, it's a leopard.
Always
His name is
see me
Lefty.
as a state. Always
His name is leopard.
So the pasuk is Bnei Yisrael Peru Shirtzu Urbu Yitzmu Bama Ma'on V'Telma Haaretz Otam. This is the first pasuk that discusses the righteous woman. All right, and the children of Israel were fruitful, and they teemed and they multiplied, and they grew strong. Elot, and the land was filled with them. Right. So the Zereshim Shon comes and explains each of the different hints in the pasuk. So we're going to do the Zereshim Shon, Gemara, and the Midrash, and keep going. Right. So just so you're aware, this year was originally 8 pages long, and I cut it down to 5.
Okay.
Wow.
All right. So fruitful, the mitzvah of Perubu, even though they couldn't go home at night, they couldn't sleep in a bed. It's called Poria in Aramaic. It's a kind of bed, apparently.
Oh, really?
Apparently.
Interesting.
This is talking about both the men and the women here. The Egyptians did everything in their power to prevent the Jewish people from having children. They were afraid they were going to take over. They were afraid of the Redeemer. They just didn't want them to have children. They made their lives miserable. Right? We know the idea that the men and the women's jobs were switched. It's not clear here what was happening if the men's jobs were supposed to be in the house, women's jobs were supposed to be in the field, because it says the woman went out to the field to be with her husband. So it could be just at this point that they had to collect their own straw to make their own cement, to make their own bricks. And therefore, they were never able to fill their quota during daylight hours, and therefore had to stay in the field. Right, so we know there's also the idea that women were first to do the men's work, and men were first to do the women's work. That never really goes over well. Men don't really do so well with housework necessarily, but they do try. So basically, the woman went out to the fields to be with her husband. Husbands were reluctant to be with their wives because of the decree of the Egyptians that the babies were going to be thrown in the Nile, especially the male babies, right? We know this. Amram was the one who started it.
Later on, though, I'm 100 and some years.
Yeah.
I don't know, a couple hundred years.
It doesn't say exactly
Yeah.
when this took place. This is towards the end of the story. It comes up in Shemos already. So the Gemara in Sota tells the following. Rabbi Vera is found in the merit of the righteous woman of that generation. Yisrael was redeemed from Egypt. When the woman went to draw water, Kadosh Baruch Hu arranged for little fish in their pitchers, and they drew half water, half fish. When they would cook in 2 pots.
What do you mean they would cook in 2 pots?
One for hot water and one for fish.
Wow.
Okay.
What would you do?
Well, that's how Hashem got them food.
Okay, and they would bring the hot water and the fish to their husbands in the field. Why the hot water? They would wash them and anoint them and feed them and give them to drink. This is what the Gemara is telling us. And would nizakot for them between the sheaves, as it says, if you lay between the sheaves. Now, nizakot is kind of just connect.
What's the word?
Nizakot.
What does it mean?
It's like a connection. There's no really good English translation according to my husband. Nun zayin kuf kuf vav.
Niskakot.
Yes.
Oh,
What?
that's used in
Is
all
the
Chazal
maybe.
with-
Maybe. What does it say?
Um,
No, but it's
When
used
is
for this,
kakot for them
in
between-
Hebrew as well.
Yeah, so we
Um,
just kind of went with connect, and there's not a proper English translation because it's using so many different forms and,
mhm,
okay?
mhm.
So it's, in Tehillim, it says that if you lay between the sheaves, Tehillim 68:14, there's a whole pasuk about this there. Basically, because the decrees of the Egyptians, women, sheaves, sheaves, as in like wheat sheaves, corn
Okay.
sheaves, sheaves. There's different explanations for that word. Some say donkey, whatever. I went with sheaves. Basically, because the decrees of the Egyptians, the woman decided that they were not going to give in to them like the husbands, and they were going to be with their husbands. So I kind of started from this, that we learn how to convince them to do something they don't want to do. Make sure that they're happy, they're clean, have
This
good,
is specifically of men.
yes,
If you feed men and you keep them,
exactly.
you look after them, they're happy.
She's kind of right. I mean,
Mm.
my husband's happy, he's got food and clean clothes, he doesn't need anything else,
Yeah. Really,
Yeah.
men are much less complicated than women. Women are the problem.
Well,
Like some of my daughters are, they're not just like boys, girls, different ones. Also, my granddaughters are teachers. It is such a different absolute culture. Like 3-year-old boys or 3-year-old girls. They're a different world. Yeah, most of them prefer being down on boys.
Yeah. So the woman only returned home once they'd been with their husband. The mistress says at this point they were already pregnant. Okay, so I don't know if that happened straight away. They spent more than one night in the field. I don't know. It just says this is what it says. All right. So the Zereshim shown on the pasuk continues. When it says the following, and they teemed like shuratzim, teeming creepy crawlies, and they multiplied, even though they had to give birth outdoors, which is dangerous and could have caused the death of the children. Nevertheless, they multiplied. They gave birth in the apple orchards underneath a tree. All right, to hide from the Egyptians. It's unclear why they chose to do it this way, but this is what they did, mostly to hide from the Egyptians. So when it says like creepy collies, it means they gave birth in the orchards with no birth pains. Okay, like animals, and two, because they were having 6 children at once. All right. I mean, that's the common measure. They were having multiple children at one time. Most of them say 6. So it's also a creepy collie can have 6 children at one time. Not normal among humans usually. So yeah, right. Animals. So, but not only did they give birth outside in the orchards, they gave birth with no help. Right. So how did the babies survive? The pasuk comes to explain this with the following, and they grew strong. Angels came down to clean and take care of the baby like a midwife, so the children would grow up strong and healthy. So they came down from Shemaim, obviously, to clean the babies up so that they could survive. It uses the same word as shifra, to beautify, basically. And the Zereshim kind of brings that it's almost like how the animals would clean their young, their litter, they lick them. They would lick them clean and dry them off, and
Not only with little animals, you probably know that it stimulates them. If you get a little one day, whatever, they don't know how to urinate. But the mother really, it's like,
okay.
they just die. They get these little, like the little things, the old green or whatever.
hamsters, guinea pigs.
Yeah. And so it went to some shelter or something, and then you have to like stroke them. Literally, they're like the mother finds them so that they know how to enter them.
Wow.
Okay.
Could be all the little animals that have this brown.
Okay, so the Medrash is very similar to the Gemara, but we're going to quickly go through it. The women were already pregnant when they returned home from the fields. When the time came for them to give birth, they cast their gaze heavenward and said to Hashem, I have done my part regarding what you said, be fertile and multiply. Now you do your part, right? So they fulfilled the mitzvah of pure rebu. Now they're just calling out to Hashem and saying, now you have to help us. Okay. The woman would go to the fields to prevent the Egyptians from killing their sons and would give birth under the apple trees, as it says in Shir Hashirim, under the apple tree I roused you. It was there your mother conceived you. There she who bore you conceived you. Hashem would dispatch 2 angels from heaven above who would cleanse the infants as a midwife cleanses a newborn. Right? They then brought the infants 2 round stones.
2
Round stones. My husband preferred cakes over stones, but most people translate it as stones.
What was the word he said?
He preferred cakes.
What
What
is
is that
it?
word?
What did you say?
What's that word? Cake.
Cake.
Cake,
Cake. Like
Cake.
that kind of
cake is
C-A-K-E.
in something yummy.
Yes.
Ah,
Cakes. Cakes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm listening.
One of oil and the other of honey. And they fed them, as it says in Devarim, he fed him honey from the crag and oil from the flinty rock. My husband didn't like rocks or stones because he's like, how do you get food from a stone? And I said, it's just like water can come from a stone.
You don't know
Apparently,
what the
food.
word is in Hebrew?
I don't have it. I think I have it written. I do. It's igalon.
How do you spell it?
Ein Gimel Vav Lamed Yud Nun.
Eglon. Eglonim, they brought 2 eglonim.
Yes.
Okay.
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 something round.
Yes.
But
So most commentators translate, like Mara translated it as stone.
You,
round
as
stone.
you said, that's the way I would have answered as well. If God can make water come from a stone, he can make food come from a
Right. So
stone.
the whole
for
story is
babies.
pretty miraculous at this point, right? The angels are
Yeah,
coming down to
yeah,
take care of
yeah,
these
yeah.
babies. So
They put them on the ground or something to get
Yeah.
we're
it.
gonna get
right,
there.
right.
Wait, you're
Yeah.
rushing
And
ahead.
they actually buried them.
If you wait, Ruth, we're gonna get there.
Oh,
Wait.
no, she
I
mentioned
know,
it,
I told
think-
her to wait too.
Okay.
All right. So according to another idea, another Masorah, that it was Hashem himself who came down and cared for the infant. As it says in classical, I washed you in water and clothed you with embroidered garments. And Shmos Rabbah and Devarim Rabbah. Okay. So where do we see the 2 stones in the pasuk? According to the Darshon, he darshans it the following way: Elat Elat Ma'on Ma'on is double, wording for 2 kinds of igalon, cake, oil, and honey, as my husband preferred to translate it. He didn't like stones, but so he went with cakes. The Gemara says on this idea the following: in the merit of laying between the sheaves, Yisrael married the loot of Egypt. Like it says, if you lie between the sheaves, dove wings covered in silver, wings covered in gold. So the dove wings refers to Klal Yisrael. The dove wings,
The dove.
dove
Wing.
dove wings refers to Klal Yisrael. It's pasuk in Tehillim, and then they were able to take from the Egyptians all their riches because of what the woman did with their husbands and going out to the field. Right, the Zerah continues and says the following: the land filled with them. The land swallowed the children in order to hide them. Why were the children swallowed up by the land? The Egyptians were furious with the Jews that somehow they were still managing to have children. Right, the whole point. The Egyptians were terrified of this. They were not interested. They were scared the Jews would overtake them as a population. They were just as scared of the Redeemer. They just didn't want the Jews to be able to continue having children. Remember, the Jews were having 6 children at once. The Egyptians were not having 6 children at once. So they were terrified that the Jews would become the majority in the land. It's also one of the reasons they were enslaved to begin with, besides the fact that they started going out to be part of the Egyptians. It was one of the reasons it's brought down is that the Egyptians were afraid the Jews would take over the land. So they went into the fields to find the babies the women were having in the fields to kill them. Gemara expounds and says, for it says the following: when the Egyptians realized, they brought stones to go and kill them. And a miracle occurred for them, and they were swallowed into the ground. The infants would reappear far away before being swallowed yet again. Puff up, puff up, puff up, puff up, puff up, puff up.
Wow.
Yes. It's Tehillim 129:3. Not exactly that, but similar. So, and then another idea on this is the Egyptians would bring bulls and plowed on top of them, as it says on top in Tehillim in 129. Once they left, they sprouted and came up like grasses in the field, as it says, multitudes like sprouts of the field in Neoclassical. And once they grew, they came in herds to their houses, as it says there. So we see that these children were raised under the earth in some sort of miraculous manner. And here, when we talk about the children growing like weeds, it is literal. They literally grew up like weeds in the
Wow.
fields. They sprouted like weeds.
What age did they appear at home?
When they were
5
fully
months.
grown.
5 months?
5 months.
They walked home?
They've just been growing like weeds, honey.
Yep.
They're gone, they're big already.
So, but how do they know which house was theirs? They never met their parents. They were raised in the earth by angels, by Hashem. Like, what's going on? So, according to the Medrash, Hashem would enter with them. He would show each one his house and tell them, your father is named so-and-so, and your mother is named so-and-so. The child would ask her, don't you remember that you gave birth to me in such and such a field on such and such a day 5 months ago? She'd ask him, and who raised you? And the child would reply, a young man with curly hair. None is as fair as he. Here he is outside, and he brought me here. So this seems to imply that Hashem took some sort of form. I cannot explain that to you, but remember, like, it was a different time, and they saw Hashem in this way. And his mother would request, show him to me. They would go out and search in all the lanes and alleys, but they could not find him. This is a Medrash in Devarim. Why does it say 5 months? Not sure. Honestly, I was like, what, 5 months? What do you mean? They're 5 months old, right? We're all like,
Yes, because after 3 months that the Egyptians stopped hunting for them,
Yeah.
2 months and longer, and there's no baby there,
right.
then you can sneak into the,
Could be.
something like that.
But it sounds like they're fully grown at this point. Like, but as we learned, Moshe also grew up very fast last week, right? We talked about how they said he was 24 months old, and he was fully grown already. So,
Well,
something was different then that we just don't have today.
you read this in Dora.
Yes, but I kind of thought of that, like, Hashem is doing the raising, so time doesn't really matter here. Like, I mean,
They just had to be big enough that the Egyptians would say, hey, you have a baby.
right. And also, if they waited too long, one wouldn't remember exactly where they gave birth and which field under which tree. Of course, they remember that they gave birth, and yes, it doesn't talk about this. Once it just talks about the child coming, but yes, they went in flocks and herds to their houses. So, I mean, after, they're always going to remember that they gave birth in a field, but they may not remember exactly which field and which spot,
I
after.
don't get it. They gave birth and then what? The babies disappeared?
Basically,
And
they
they
were
went
looked
home?
after by the angels.
They didn't have a choice.
Yeah,
They couldn't
like
take
we
the
did our
babies
part.
home.
Now take care of the rest.
Okay.
The Egyptians wanted to kill the boys, especially,
Yeah,
right?
and then, I mean, they would stop reproducing again 5 months later, or?
I have no idea.
Especially when how many people there were at the end and how many.
That's
years
what
was
it is.
and
You
how-
see, after 200 years, you've got to actually work
No,
out.
I didn't say what the question.
That's right. It didn't start so fast.
Wasn't it 600,000 went out between men and
600,000 infrastructure, that was like 3 million or.
It was
right? It was
600,000
men,
Well,
and then there were
men
600,000.
aged 20 to 60 with the- all the children were not coming, the women
Right.
were not coming.
So you have to assume there's 600,000 women in that age range. So
Minimum like 3 million.
there was a lot of people leaving. Basically, I cannot tell you when they started having children again. It didn't come up in this explanation. All right, so Chazal, when telling the story of the Exodus, makes a much bigger deal out of the woman's portion in this, right? If they constantly bring out the fact that it was the woman who were the ones to bring about the Gula.
In the moon and then the.
In the yes,
Follow up of their moon.
exactly. And they because I'll bring it down because of the fact that they went on to have children despite Paro's decrees. And so God, Hashem aided them in realizing this and through miraculous means, and this resulted in a generation that knew Hashem intimately because of their mothers. Therefore, we see that because of the woman, the Jewish people continued to grow, and because of this, they strengthened themselves. And those who came out in the righteous woman. And we know that 1/3 of the Jewish people also died in Egypt, right? No, sorry, it was 3/5.
80%.
Four-fifths died. Only 1/3 went out. So 1/5 went out. So you know, imagine how many Jews there actually were.
Yeah, I never think about that.
Yeah.
But if they had been nurtured by Hashem You would think that all they want to do is be with Nashim, and
But it's not us. We don't know how many children were actually altered by Hashem. We don't know.
they must have all been with
We don't know that. There's no way of knowing exactly what went down in Egypt. We know
Because
that
even
four
so,
fish.
We're from that, we were, the people who came out were at our dinner. How long did it take to
Or
the
you don't-
egg?
Yeah.
You know,
Okay,
it's not-
okay.
Well, even in our own, how much do you think that people do for them? You know, it's not, we're familiar with it.
Um, so there's a fun anecdote in the Chasam Sofer on a random shuba that had nothing to do with the righteous woman. My husband was looking, he found this fun anecdote that the question really deserved a longer answer, but he's being kicked out of his office by the righteous woman who come to clean for Pesach. I just thought it was really cute and that it was worth sharing. He didn't actually have anything in the righteous woman, but he had this little comment about cleaning for Pesach.
The husband sober said that.
Yes.
And,
There's something that I took out, but it said that the children were the first ones to sing Shira at Kiryas Yamsuf because they're the first ones to recognize Kadosh Baruch Hu, because they'd already seen him, so they recognized him immediately.
wow. We have our righteous woman who, she raised money the whole year and sent him to, a pension like for the week before, so she could see that those who don't have. She wouldn't- just give it a turn.
Okay. All right. So Pesach, right? We are obligated in all the mitzvahs of the Seder night, including the 4 cups, which is very unusual because it is time bound, but it's because we played a central role in the story of Pesach and the Gula. And it's very different from Sukkot, which doesn't have that same theme going through it. It's not about a Gula, Galus Gula, and the woman didn't play a central role.
I think this is the reason why my husband and they would say that he was never marking the whole year. He told us when he would go to Beit Knesset. My husband would leave from Beit Knesset to Leila Seder, Erev Leila Seder. He would tell the women in the house that you should definitely daven married. Because otherwise we'd end up being more mechuyaf in Kiddush than him, and then it messes up the Seder, you know, the whole.
Could be.
Because of this thing with the women are exactly.
Yes, we are definitely obligated in the mitzvahs of Seder night, and more so than most other chagim. But we see the same thing with Purim story. We're also obligated in the mitzvahs of Purim because Esther Malka again played a gigantic role there, and also with Hanukkah. Rashi brings us in Pesachim that the woman played a big role. It could be Yehudas, could be someone else, but the woman played a big role in the story of Hanukkah as well, and helping to bring about the Google there. Therefore, these 3 holidays, women are obligated to perform the mitzvahs of those chagim, even though they're obviously time down to take time. Okay. So what about the woman in the midbar, right? We also know that they're considered righteous, right? I mean, so they didn't die like their male counterparts did, right? They didn't take part in the sin of angle. The men went to them and said, "Give us your jewelry." They said, "Absolutely not, no way." Like they weren't interested. They knew better. They said, "No, go away." So instead of giving their jewelry for the clean eagle, they gave it for the Mishkan, along with their copper mirrors.
There you see that you could have said the first section, no, they don't want to give them the jewelry because they're selfish or they're egoist. Here they gave it freely, so it has to do with the right reasons.
Yes, it has to be the right reasons, and they were very much about the right reasons for us to see. So the mirrors were especially used to make the kior in the Mishkan. They handed the mirrors over directly to Moshe. This is in verse 2. So what is so special about these copper mirrors? The basic explanation according to Pasuk, these mirrors belong to the woman who gathered at the entrance to the tent of meeting. Okay?
The what?
These mirrors belong to the woman who gathered at the entrance to the Ohel Moed, to the tent of meeting. The word sa'avot is commonly used in reference to an army, which can be interpreted to mean a gathering people for a specific task. Okay, this is from Rabbi Leah Cohn in her book Woman in Tanakh. The Medrash brings down the more well-known explanation, which is that these are the mirrors that the women used to beautify themselves when they went down to meet their husbands in the field. And they also use these mirrors to show their husbands their reflections together, their joint reflections, to show them they were meant to be together. This is the proper way to do things. to encourage them to be with them, to have children despite everything that was happening around them. Therefore, the Torah refers to these mirrors as Savot Ma'arot, or the mirrors of armies, to remind us of the children that they had because of their righteousness. Right? Now, Moshe didn't want these mirrors. In fact, he was offended by them. Hashem came down and said, absolutely not. You don't know what you're talking about. Obviously not in those exact words, but you get the idea.
This is like the best truma korba, whatever.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be looking down upon these women in their mirrors. First of all, you wouldn't exist without them, and neither would all those people you see out in front of you. And he basically told Moshe, lift your eyes up and look out at Bnei Israel. They are only here because of these women and these mirrors. He then instructed Moshe to use them to construct the Kior in space. Why specifically the Kior, which is the sink? Because just like these women use these mirrors to sanctify themselves to be with their husbands, so too the Kohanim use them to sanctify themselves before doing their work in the Mishkan. Therefore, when our intentions are pure, so too Hashem praise us in kind. Right? So what else did the women in the Midbar do? It couldn't just be these copper mirrors, like that they're, in the Chayda Eagle. Like there had to be more to this. So the Torah tells us that every woman in wise heart.
Wait, I got a question. They didn't want to give up their jewelry for the Egel, but they took them by force or what? They did take the jewelry, didn't they?
They know the men gave their own jewelry. The men also had earrings and nose rings.
They didn't take from them?
I thought
It could be they took some, but whatever they didn't take, the woman gave.
It was not willingly given.
It wasn't willing giving, and the woman gave to the Mishkan. In fact, they brought their husbands with them to show them that it was their husbands had agreed to what was happening. As in, they had permission from their husbands. Remember, this is back in Middle Ages, right? Before the Middle Ages, men still had control over these things, and the woman brought their husbands along with them to this gathering at the Illinois.
even today, whatever you own belongs to your husband. And that's the kind. Yeah, but they have these get used to have these Arab Hafshama, what I thought that they would have an event like Arachim or and there would be a program, and then they would ask you to sign a Horat Keva, and then they would say, but you have to, you have to ask your husband first, or they would like hold it and they wouldn't deposit it until they bring a proof that your husband agrees.
They don't.
It's an awesome parents own their children. We asked her, of course, and if he said, listen, it's true. Everything babysitting or whatever the girls do, it belongs to you essentially. But I never took it from my kids. I would tell them once in a while, I'm letting you keep your babysitting money, whatever. But really, you should know it belongs to me. It'll belong to your husband, whatever you were confused. But it's the MS is that.
Right. So they brought their husbands along to show that they had their permission to give their precious stuff. Okay. So the woman of wise heart in the Midbar wove with her hands in reference to the drapes of the Mishkan. What does a wise heart have to do with the skill of weaving? The commentators offer an explanation here. Because all the vessels of Mishkan had to be pure, whoever touched them also had to be pure. We were not to be impure. So what did the woman do? They didn't want to just sit idly by when they became impure for whatever reasons they were not tahar at this point. So they knew the halacha that says anything that is attached to a living animal does not become impure.
That what?
Anything that is attached to a living animal does not become impure. Yes.
Off of the living animal.
Exactly. So what would happen is that with a lot of patience, a lot of coordination between themselves, they would weave two threads together while still attached to the goat, and they would snip one part of the thread, leave the other part attached.
You're kidding.
And they would do this until they had a large enough piece of fabric, and then they would call a woman who was pure to come and cut it.
Oh, wow. Did
Okay.
you know that?
I know that they wove from a live animal, but I didn't know that
It's called the spitting.
yes,
Yeah.
they spun from the. But I didn't, and I couldn't imagine how it could defeat the.
What did the animals stand there?
Well, they tethered it,
They had,
I'm
they
sure.
also, it's one explanation that it was two women together, one to calm the goat and one to do the spinning, the weaving.
Wow.
All right. Because with all their heart, they wanted to contribute to the Mishkan, so they found a way to do it. right? So where were these drapes displayed? They weren't the ones that you see. They were underneath. They were part of the roof. They were hidden. It says they were used as part of the removable roof of the Mishkan and were often hidden under 3 layers. But they were proud of their work and preferred to make these over any other drapes. They had no interest in their drapes being the ones on display. They didn't really care. It wasn't that the drapes themselves were special, it was that their intentions were special. What their intentions were was that they wanted to do what Hashem wanted, what Hashem needed, what was needed for the Mishkan, not what they wanted to give. When we're giving because we want to give, we tend to,
Put their name on the building.
right, we want the recognition that comes along with it. We're not giving because this is the Ratzon Hashem, we're giving because we want something. Right? So it wasn't about glory or ego for these women, it was about Hashem. We're only driven by ego or glory, then we want our work to be explained. Okay. So it's interesting that these women went above and beyond the call of duty, so to speak. They would not have been faulted in Egypt if they had not gone to be with their husbands and had children.
They were not what?
Have been faulted. As in, remember, they're enslaved. They're enslaved. Their husbands are enslaved. They're working nonstop, constantly. They have no rest. They have nothing, right? And they could have gone along with their husbands, and they would not have been wrong to do it. Right? So, and also they were putting their children in danger by having them. But because they had Amunah and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they went on to be with their husbands. And in terms of giving to the Mishkan, technically, whatever their husbands gave fulfilled their obligations. They're part of one household. Okay, and it was per household what was given. It was considered to be for the whole household.
Also not committed. So it's not doing anything to forget if the husband came.
Right, they didn't have to give. But this wasn't enough for them, and therefore they gathered together in a group and brought their husbands along to show that they had their permission and gave all their precious jewelry and copper mirrors, whatever they had that hadn't been taken already, they gave freely with their whole hearts. All right. So just a few random ideas here. There's a minhag brought down in the Shulchan Aruch that women should not do melacha from Shkia onwards during Sfiras HaOmer.
What did you say?
There's minhag brought down in the Shulchan Aruch that women should not do melacha from Shkia onwards during Sfiras HaOmer. Now this could be because they didn't participate in the Planet Ego, could be,
Yeah, until when?
I assume, until the next morning.
Or until the spirit, you do after.
It doesn't, he didn't say, my husband didn't bring it, this is what he wrote. Either I could be until you can spare or until the next morning. So it could be, because they didn't participate in the Planet Ego. There is another idea that, also because we were deemed from Egypt no woman's marriage, and the main reason the breakdown is because women dealt with the dead students Rabbi Akiva. The woman dealt with the 24,000 students Rabbi Akiva who died.
They did the
They
Tahara.
did the Tahara. Now my husband wanted to know if women, he didn't, we don't know. I don't know enough about the laws of Kabbalah Kadisha or Tahara to answer that. He had that same question: do women do women, men do men, or does it?
That's what happens today.
That's what he said. But I mean, 24,000 men died. Maybe there wasn't enough men, So, and we learn from the conception and birth of Moshe where it says, just as the conception was without pain, so was the birth of the righteous woman. Do not suffer from the curse of Chava, that they should have birth pains. Okay, it does not mean that you're not righteous if you had birth pains. It's just that we're on a different level today than they were. So what do we take away from these generations? One thing to keep in mind is that when things are hidden, they tend to bring about more bracha because it tends to be more about the Ratzon of Hashem than what we want. When we go above and beyond filling Hashem's Ratzon, we are revealing His glory in this world. And this is the main point. This is the connection between Gula and Galus, that when Mashiach comes, when there is a Gula, in whatever form, Hashem's glory tends to be revealed in all of its glory. During Galus, it tends to be a lot more hidden. Not that it's not revealed in hidden ways, or that there isn't, you can't see His glory. Of course you can, but it's not as obvious as when we're in Gula, when Mashiach comes, or So we also have to constantly be yearning for Mashiach, just like the woman in Mitzrayim constantly wanted to get out, and just like the woman in Midbar, also, they wanted to fulfill the obligations in their Israel. They wanted to do what was right. They wanted to fulfill everything there. So I kind of, this is my own thing that, remember these women also had to put up with their husbands who thought that they knew better. I mean, the men said, no, we're not going to have babies. We're not going to be with our wives. The woman said, what are you talking about? And again, in the Minbar, it was the men who wanted the Chayei. The woman did not want the Chayei. They really wanted nothing to do with it. And they also had to watch their husbands and sons die in the desert, and some of them watched their children die in Egypt also. We know that plenty of babies did die in Egypt. They were smushed into the wall, they're thrown into the Nile, and why they say they weren't they weren't good souls, whatever, but they still had to watch them die. But they still went above and beyond in fulfilling Hashem's ratzon. All they wanted was to fulfill what Hashem wanted for them. And we have to be strong, just like they were, search for ways to bring out Hashem's glory in today's world. And we have to search for ways to bring Mashiach, for they say even today that Mashiach will come in the righteous woman. And that's from Gemara, actually. So it's also mentioned in Ruth, testimony on Ruth. All right. So we have to want Mashiach every day with all of our hearts, and we have to try and find ways to bring it. That is the lesson from today's class.
Very nice.
And in what ways can we help the Mashiach just for one thing, yearning for him and praying for him? What do we do? Who's first?